when you can see a title slide. You can see this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, well, Power BI paginated report. So thanks very much for having me. It's not what we planned in February, but it's the next best thing. So as an introduction, my name is Peter Myers, and I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. So it's currently 9 p.m. here. And, I've been working with Microsoft Business Intelligence products for now over 20 years. And so I'm very excited to talk to you about, one of the latest things in Power BI to do with reporting, and that is paginated reports. Now, it's a tradition in my presentations, and I invite you now to use the tiny URL you see here or the QR code. Could you just submit some feedback to me on a survey? This will tell me a little bit about who you are, and then we can use this to understand, who the target audience for this topic is. So I'll just give you the next 30 seconds to open up the survey, and then you'll see your results come back real time in this Power BI dashboard. Now, Power BI real-time is one of my favorite topics, but maybe for another time. There are a number of different real-time topics for Power BI. Dashboards is one. This is actually using a push data set with Azure Stream Analytics. So thanks for those results coming in. I'm not so much interested in your age or gender. Sometimes I am, given the topic that I'm speaking about. But tonight, I'm more interested in what your role is. So I see 3 database administrators, I see a business analyst, and I see that the range of Power BI experience is intermediate. This is good. Okay, in fact, the topic that I'm about to present to you is a very different topic to Power BI reporting, and I'll explain why in just a minute. So it doesn't require many core skills in Power BI to understand this topic. All right, so we've got a good number coming in. Thank you for participating in the survey. If I were to ask the question, what is the average experience? I might use a feature like Q&A. Yeah, what is the average Power BI experience? And the answer is 4.71. I can pin that as a visual back to the dashboard, and then I can continue to monitor, your ratings. And welcome for a couple of people that come in with 0 experience on Power BI, not a problem for tonight's topic. Now, the other thing that I can do is click through to the underlying report, and I asked you a question, what is your most important topic for tonight? Power BI reports is the most interesting topic for you, but this is not what I'm talking about tonight, although I will compare Power BI reports to the topic, which is paginated reports. And SSRS reports, as I'm about to describe to you, paginated reports are really the evolution of RDL reports in SQL Server reporting services. We can take a quick look at the decomposition tree that I now see the average is 3.67, and then I might drill into this to understand what are the differences by the roles that you have. Okay, with the DBAs coming in with the highest self-rating, and then I could even break that down into age groups to find that if you're a DBA between 40 and 44, you're coming in with one of the highest self-ratings in tonight's presentation. And, I could break that down even into gender. Okay, male. So if you haven't worked with the decomposition tree, look out for it. It's a very great way of exploring across the dimensions of your data. But it's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. All right, I'm here to talk about Power BI paginated reports. And specifically, I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to demonstrate how I can design the report. I will share with you how a user can consume the report. And then I will leave you with good reasons. In fact, 20 good reasons to consider using paginated reports. I will also give you information if you have existing SQL Server reporting services reports and how you might migrate them. And then finally, I've got some great resources for you. So given that I don't have a lot of time, I think I've got until, just before 8 o'clock, let's begin with what a paginated report is. So in Power BI, it is a report that is optimized for printing or PDF generation. It gives you, as a report author, the ability to create highly formatted pixel-perfect reports. As I've already mentioned, they're based on SQL Server Reporting Services RDL reports, and they're great for operational reports like printing an invoice. Now, they're developed with a different tool. We don't use Power BI Desktop for paginated reports. We use a dedicated tool that is Power BI Report Builder. And you might also hear that paginated reports can be described as pixel-perfect reports. Now, in contrast, we have Power BI reports that are developed in Power BI Desktop. They're optimized not for printing, but for exploration and interactivity. And they include, an extraordinary array of functionality and interactive features and ultra-modern visuals as well, including custom visuals. So these are ideal when you know that your report consumers need to explore and understand meaning and patterns within data. So we can refer to these reports as interactive analytic reports. But let's just see it in demo. So what I have for you here in a Power BI app is a report that's called the Sales Analysis Report. Now, being a Power BI report, it includes, slices that allow me to filter the page. I've got some ultra-modern visuals here, including a combo clustered column chart with the line. And I can hover over the month sales, and I can see tooltips, and I can even click to cross-filter the page by that selection. And this is a good example of what an analytic report is designed to do. It allows me to explore and understand the data. Now, this report has a second page, and the page name is sales order, and I want you to notice that I've filtered by a single sales order. And what the sales order presents to me in this Power BI table, and I scroll vertically down to the bottom, is that the order has 72 lines. But what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to export this analytic report to PDF, and we're going to see what result we get. Now, this could take a little bit of time, maybe 10, 20 seconds. So I'll explain what the report will do. That when an analytic report is rendered to PDF, it's obviously no longer interactive. And the other thing to understand is that an analytic report has a fixed page size and it cannot expand or grow to display all data. All right, so let's watch what happens when the PDF report is returned to me and that my sales order has 72 lines. Well, how many are we going to see when this is rendered to PDF? Well, here it is, open for me. I want you to notice that it's a 2-page report. So here we have page 1, but this slicer is not interactive. It's just an image. So no more cross-filtering. But when I scroll down to page 2, you'll see that I have the first 11 lines, but it's impossible for me to scroll down and see the rest. So if you want your customer to pay the entire invoice, well, this will not be a way to deliver the invoice to them. Now, to compare it to a paginated report, in the app, my second report is the sales order. This is a Power BI paginated report, and what you'll see is that it has a parameter pane here, allowing me to filter by a single order number. And then if I navigate to the last page, I can see that this is in fact a 2-page report. And when I go to export it, notice that we've got here 7 different rendering formats, of which PDF is one. So I'll export this report as PDF. And let's see what the result looks like. Well, as a paginated report, notice that there are 3 pages. And I'm going to point out to you that this is what we refer to as a page header. I have a table, and the table has a header. And then as I scroll down, I also have a footer. And we can see that we've got the date and time and also a page number. And this report will be as long as the number of sales order lines. And there we go. Line number 72 appears on page 3. So I think this is a good example then of the difference comparing a Power BI report to a paginated report. So a word about licensing before I get into a demonstration. So you will develop the reports on your desktop using Power BI Report Builder, and like Power BI Desktop, this tool is free and available for you to download, no cost. However, when you go to operationalize your reports, they must be published to Power BI in a workspace, and that workspace must meet two requirements. The workspace must be on dedicated capacity. Either that's achieved with a premium subscription or an Azure Power BI embedded resource. The second thing is that workspace the capacity that the workspace is based on must have the paginated reports workload enabled. All right. The other consideration for licensing is that if you publish a report from Power BI Report Builder to a non-personal workspace, then you will need a Power BI Pro license as well. All right. So now with that understanding, what I'd love to do is go through how to design the sales order report for the AdventureWorks company. We'll look at Report Builder, retrieving data, parameterization, a discussion about data visualizations, interactivity, and then publication of the report. All right, so what I'm going to do is launch Power BI Report Builder. And the first thing that I see is the Getting Started window that lets me use a wizard that I can fast track the design of my report, or I could use the blank report template. And let me quickly introduce you to the Report Builder. All right, so the first thing that I see here is the report canvas. And this is the report layout where you get to define what goes where. Across the top, you'll see, just like in an Office product, you have a ribbon. So common functionality is available here on the ribbon. Then at the left, you've got the report data pane. And the report data pane allows you to create and manage resources like data sources, data sets, parameters, and images that are used by your report. Along the bottom, we have the grouping pane. And when you're working with data regions like a table or matrix, you might configure groupings down in this pane. But wait, there's more. On the View Ribbon tab, if I turn on the Properties window, you'll see on the right that we have, for the selected object on the report canvas, we have the properties that you could either read or modify. But I'll also point out to you that you've got, for some objects like the report, you have property pages that provide a very convenient, friendly way to configure common properties. All right, and then we have a parameters pane as well. So the parameters pane allows you to lay out the parameters that are typically used by your users to input data, like what is the sales order number, etc. So now that I've introduced you to how Report Builder is laid out, the first thing I'm going to do is a file save, and I'm going to save this locally to my demo folder, and I'm going to name it Sales Order. And I want you to notice that it is an RDL report, that if you have experience with SQL Server reporting services, it is the same report definition. There are some unsupported features though, so I want to talk about those later in the presentation. So now that I've saved, the first thing that I do when I develop a paginated report is I give thought to how am I going to output it? Am I going to print it? Is it going to render to PDF? What will the page size be? Now, if I open up the report page's properties, you'll see that I can determine, am I working in inches or centimeters? Let's make it centimeters. It will default to your regional settings. For the paper size, am I going to be portrait, landscape, and what are the dimensions of the paper size? So tonight, I think you guys are probably A4. And so therefore, you'll see that the width and height are then fixed. Now, next is the consideration for margins, and I'm going to make them all 1 centimeter, which gives me more room for my data on the page. And therefore, there is some mathematics to consider. With a width of 21 centimeters and margins of 1 centimeter each, 21 minus 1 minus 1 means that I have 19 centimeters available for my report layout. So next thing that I do, and I'm going to share with you that the blank template includes the body and it includes the page footer down here. Now, when I click the body, you can see in the properties window that the body object is selected. I'm going to modify the width property and make it 19. Okay, because I know that is the maximum width that we supported for the print to an A4 piece of paper. Now, the next thing is that I have a couple of text boxes. There's a text box up here at the top of the body, and I can put in the title of my report. There's one also in the footer, and I'm going to move it to the very far right, and it displays the execution time. Now, my intention is that the title should be on the top of not the first page only, but every page. So on the Insert Ribbon tab, I can turn on the header, and then I position the title at the top of the report header. Now I'm guaranteed it will repeat on every page. And then I'm going to right-click here in the header and insert an image, because the company wants to display its logo in the top right of every page. And there we go. So I go ahead and save the report, and something that you'll do often when you're developing these reports, and you can do this on the Home Ribbon tab, is you can preview it. And you can say, well, what will that report look like? Now, there's a great command here that says, show it in print layout. And when I do that, we get an idea of what this will look like on an A4 piece of paper. And so far, so good. Now, obviously, the next step in the development is to retrieve some data. And so in my report data pane, you'll see that I have the data sources folder. And when I right click it, I can either connect to a data set in Power BI, or as I will do in demonstration, I could connect to one of these data source types. Azure Analysis Services, Azure SQL DW, or it's now been renamed as Azure Synapse, or Azure SQL Database. If it's an on-premises source, it could be SQL Server, SQL Server Analysis Services, Oracle, or Teradata. Well, tonight in my demonstration, I'll use an Azure SQL database, and then I'm going to enter in here the connection details. I'll connect by using a fixed credential, and then I'll enter my database name. And I'll test that connection. Okay, I've spelt something wrong. Read-only user, or my password must be wrong. Try again. No, or I've spelt my database name wrong. My memory is getting worse. I think we're right. Now we've got success. Okay, so when I click OK, the connection string is now copied into my data source. And what I typically do is I name the data source the same name as the database I'm connecting to. And you'll see now in my report data pane, I have a connection to the Azure SQL database that is the AdventureWorks DW 2020. So step 2 then is to add a data set. Now we want to be careful that a data set is not the same thing as a Power BI data set. Data set is really a command to retrieve data in a paginated report. And Reporting Services has used that name for almost 18 years now. Okay, so don't get confused between the two different data set types. And I'm going to name this data set DS main. That this is the principal data set that my report will use to retrieve order line details. Now, for the query type, because it's Azure SQL, I could type a query in, or I could copy paste from my favorite tool like Management Studio, or I could choose a store procedure that returns a single result set. Now, there is a third option, and that is I could use the support of the graphical query designer to go ahead and define my query like this. All right, so I know that I need from factory seller sales, I need to bring in the order line number, so I check it. I know in a related table that I need to bring in the reseller name. And I need to bring in the product name. And then I need to bring in details like the quantity, the price, and the sales amount. So what I've just done there is I've built up 6 fields that I know I need in my report design. And then next I give consideration to filtering that query by adding a filter. And the filter will be based on the sales order number. And I'm going to test it by entering the number 51721. Now, if you remember, that was the example that I used earlier. This is the order line that had 72 lines. So what I can now do on the menu of the Query Designer is run the query and see what it looks like. And of course, we should verify that this is going to be returning 72 lines, and there they are. Now, before I finish, there's a very important capability here on the filters that we can parameterize them, which allows the end user to modify the value. So let me check the checkbox, then click OK. And the query is then copied into my data set, and have a look at the where clause here, where the sales order number equals at sales order number. So this has now been parameterized. Now, before I finish my configuration, what I do like to do is provide more friendly names for my fields. So I have the line field, the reseller field. This one will become the product field. Then I can have quantity, I can have price, and I can have sales. All right. Now, when I click OK, you'll see that the data set is added to the report data pane. But also 2 other things happened. In the parameter pane, now I have a parameter named sales order number. And then in the parameters area, you'll see it's here as well. All right, so let's take a look at the parameter. It has a unique name. It has a friendly prompt, so I can put in some more friendly words there, like order number. You can provide available values that will be presented in a drop-down list. We'll take a look at this later. And you can specify default values. And you'll notice here the default value that is the same value that my query designer used. Now, ordinarily, I should not publish the report with this default. But tonight, when I'm doing the report design, it makes my design faster, because when I preview the report, it will automatically filter by this order. So I'm going to leave the default in. All right, so if we're going to put filters on a report, it's a good idea to communicate those filters on the header of the report. So I'm going to insert a text box, and I'm going to position it directly beneath the title. And I'm going to start typing in order number colon. Now, this is very interesting for text boxes. I can right click and I can add what's known as a placeholder. And the placeholder can use expressions like this. Go and use the value of the sales order number parameter. And there it is. And I can also format order number. And here on the home ribbon, I just make it bold. And I'm going to do this one more time. Insert another text box, which will return the reseller name. So reseller, insert placeholder, this time using an expression from my data set to bring the reseller field in. So let's preview the report and see now what it looks like. So I want you to notice that we're now filtering on order 51721 and look at the details that are now included in the header of each page. Good, this is good progress. So now I'm going to focus on the design of the body itself. And you see here on the insert ribbon is where I've got the ability to insert report items like text boxes and images and lines and rectangles. But I also have a group that are known as the data regions: table, matrix, and list. So it is my intention to insert a table. Let's do that again, insert a table. And I'm going to position it at the top of the body. All right, now a table is characterized by fixed columns, but vertically it will grow according to the data in the data set. Are there 72 order lines? Are there 10? Are there 50? Now it can also have groupings on the rows as well. So let's have a look at this. In fact, a table is really a template, and each of these are just text boxes, but they have different behaviors. For example, this is the header row, this is the detail row. These text boxes are for column 1, column 2, column 3. Now what I do is I hover over the detail for column 1 and I click and select the field that is the line field. And then in the column 2, I bring in the product. And then number 3, I bring in quantity. Now to introduce some more columns, I can right click the column guide and insert a column to the right, do that a second time. And now I bring in price and sales. All right, let's preview the report now and see what the table looks like. All right, so I want you to notice on the ribbon, first of all, that the report is now 5 pages long. Now, when I scroll down, I can see, look, there's a table header and I've got some values. And when I get to the last page, I don't see a total. So where is my last page? Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. There we go. Row 72. So there are several things that I need to do to finish this report. I wouldn't totals down here. I noticed that the table header does not repeat on other pages. You see it on the first page, but you don't see it repeating. Line number could probably be a line to the left. Product probably should be a wider column. All right, when you can see here that if the column is not wide enough, then it just wraps and the height of the text box grows. The price and sales could also be formatted as currency. All right, so I think I've said this, that on the last page, I'd like to see totals down here, like what is the total quantity and what is the total of the order. So I'm going to switch back to design. And if I just multi-select these 2 text boxes, I can right-click and add totals for them. Now, in fact, this is the table footer that I've just added. So I'm going to put some text in the first column of the footer, and then I'm going to format the entire row in bold. And then I'll select the header row. And to make this look good, I'm going to use a green color and format in white. I'm going to increase the font size and even the height, and then format in the middle and make it bold. Okay, so these text boxes, they're just like cells in an Excel worksheet. For the line column, I want to make them left justified. For the product column, I want that to be as wide as possible. Remember, the body should not exceed 19 centimeters, and we can just verify that that's still set correctly. For the quantity column, we could do formatting up here on the ribbon, just like in Excel, although my preference is to use the properties window. That because these are numbers, I use format code N0. And if you're familiar with .NET format codes, this is exactly the same thing. In fact, the paginated reports use VB.NET as its expression language. Now for price and sales, I'm going to format them as C for currency, followed by 2 for 2 decimal places. So let's now take a look at what the report looks like. Much, much better. In fact, there are now only 3 pages to this report because that product column is not word wrapping anymore. And when I come to the last page, I can see my totals, but I'm a little bit concerned still because I don't see the header here anymore. And also, I would like to see page details in the footer. So let me make those adjustments. I come back to design. In fact, I want to right justify these and this one. And this is a little bit crazy, but the way that we make a table header repeat on each page is hidden down here. In the grouping pane, we can turn on what is known as advanced mode. Now, these tables and matrices are very complex structures if you need them to be, and they can control how your grid data is visualized. But what I can tell you is that for my row group here, I can enable the property that is called repeat on new page. Okay, so now if I come back and run this report and I navigate to page 2, you can see the table header has repeated. All right, let's take a look then at the footer, and remember that the original template included a text box in the report footer, and if we look at its expression, it returns the execution time of the report. Now, something to be aware of with the execution time is that because it's published to Power BI service, it will use UTC as the time. Now, when you run it on your desktop in Power BI Report Builder, then it uses local time. So I'm just going to build up a text expression that says executed UTC : and then I'll come to my common functions and I'll see that there's a format function. All right, well, let's format the execution time as DD YYYY 24-hour. So that's going to format it in what makes sense to me here in Australia. And then I continue to build up my string by adding some more text. And from my built-in fields, I just double-click page number. So this expression now returns the execution time in UTC and the page details. Now, while I'm here, I want to point out that a very important built-in field is the user ID, that you can also query who is the current user, and you can do this to change interactivity or filter data. And that way you could enforce, data permissions for different users. There's another one that's interesting. The report can also understand what report format it is being used to render. And therefore you could do different things. If it's rendered in Excel, you might do something different to if it's rendered as PDF. Now let me click OK and let's come back and have a look. And we now see that there's much nicer page footer going on here at the bottom. All right then, so let's go to the last page. Looking good. We now have a 3-page report. All right, so that gives you an idea of how to design a paginated report, but I want to show you some really cool things that paginated reports can do. For example, at the moment, we have a single report parameter prompting us for the order. I'm going to improve the layout by first prompting the user for which reseller and then give them a list of orders that have been made for that reseller. And so that has me creating a new parameter. I'm going to name the parameter reseller. Okay. And I'm then going to create a new data set and I'll call it DS reseller. And I'll open up the query designer. And all I want to do is produce a list of the resellers. So give me the reseller key and give me the reseller name. All right, and then it gives me all of the resellers. I do want the reseller name to sort alphabetically. So what I will do here in the query is I will modify it by saying order by reseller name. Now, at the moment, you'll see that my parameters are order number and reseller. Well, first of all, let me move them around so we now have reseller and then order, but I don't want this to be a text box. I come in and I modify the parameter properties with available values, and I tell it to get them from my DS reseller. There are 2 fields in that data set. The value is the key and the label is the reseller name. All right, I'm also going to no, that's enough. That's it. And now you'll see when I run the report that I have a drop-down list to choose from. But I want the order number to also be a drop-down list. And so I create another data set that I'll call DS order number. And I'm going to type in this query, go and select the distinct sales order number from fact reseller sales, and this is the important part, where reseller key equals at reseller key. Remember the parameterization of the query. And then I will order by sales order number. Because of that filter, the report knows automatically. Let's just delete this. I didn't want that to happen. It will automatically, I made a mistake. Let me come back to dataset properties. I want it to filter by reseller, which is the name of my parameter up here. Okay, when I come to this parameter, the one that was created by the query designer, I can now use the available values from DS order number. Okay, and I'm going to remove the default. So now what it means is that we can go ahead and they're now in the wrong order. I can come in here and choose a reseller like Activity Center. And then this drop-down list are the orders for that reseller. Let's try a different reseller, Big Cycle Mall. And then I choose a sales order number. And there is the order for Big Cycle Mall. All right, this feature is called cascading parameters. And it's a very cool capability that's built into paginated reports. All right, so I've pretty much arrived at the end of the design. So what I do is I make sure that I remove defaults. I remove any blank space at the end of the report. I save the report, and then I save as, and here is how I publish to the Power BI service. And so I'm going to publish this to one of my workspaces as sales order Singapore. Now, once published, that means I can come back to Power BI here and go to my demo RDL, and there is the sales order Singapore. I can click it, and here it is now rendering through the Power BI service, which is good because it's available for distribution in Power BI apps. It's available on the mobile device, and there are collaborative capabilities that I'll talk about in a minute. So what I've just demonstrated to you is an introduction to Report Builder, how to retrieve data with data sources and data sets, parameterization including cascading parameters. The data visualizations I've shown are text boxes, images, and the table data region. Interactivity I haven't covered tonight, and publication, pushing that RDL document to a workspace in Power BI. So what does it mean for the user experience to consume, embed, and deliver? Well, it's very easy to open up a paginated report, and they will interact with parameters, and they will, on the right-hand side, they will click View Report. And the report is rendered in HTML, but they have the ability to render in different formats if they want. Output this as a PDF, give it to me as a PowerPoint presentation, so much more flexibility than Power BI reports. Now on the file, they could print it directly from the browser. That would use PDF rendering. If they had permission, ownership permission, they could download the RDL document. They could embed this perhaps into SharePoint, and so they could copy this URL, and then it's easy to embed this into a blog or website. There's another feature called URL embedding or URL access. And let me just show you in Notepad that if I copy that URL, the first part of the URL is the address to the report in a Power BI workspace. And then you can see the parameter values have been passed in here. And it's also possible to pass in other directives like export this as a PDF report. Now, what that means is on a website or an intranet site, you could put hyperlinks. You could even go to a Power BI report and you could somehow generate this maybe with a measure. You could generate a URL that is used inside a report that opens a paginated report. Okay, so that's the capability from an embedding point of view. Now you can collapse the parameters pane, you can navigate between pages, there's collaborative comments. which are just like the comments you can have for Power BI reports. But a big story is how you can have paginated reports delivered based on subscriptions. So if I create a subscription here, you can see you can determine what rendering format is used. You can specify whether to use current parameters or the default values in the report itself. Often you would use defaults, especially if parameters are doing time filters, because you can use expressions that are relative to the current date. You can put in the email address of anybody, you know, my friend at Hotmail. Now, the tenant can turn off external sharing. You will see here that there's a warning. Okay, you can do this, but you are sending this to somebody outside your organization. The email subject and email could be specified. The frequency can be anywhere from hourly to monthly. You can put the scheduled time and the time zone. Okay, so let's put Singapore in there. And do you grant them access to open the report in Power BI? Do you give them a link to open the report? And do you give them a preview image? And when you click Save, the Power BI service will automatically deliver, according to your schedule, that report. That's the story of consumption, embedding, and delivery. And of course, you can distribute them in Power BI apps, which was my first demonstration. All right, so now that you understand how to build them and how to consume them, when would you use a paginated report instead of a Power BI report? Well, here's 20 good reasons. And the first one is that it's print ready. Okay, so it's been designed specifically to print or to output to PDF. You have a choice of 7 rendering formats, which are HTML, PDF, CSV, XML. You've got Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Precision layout that you've got to a fraction of a centimeter to control position and location. So you've got a very, very good pixel perfect ability to lay out your report. You have dynamic layouts as well, because expressions can be used to control many behaviors at rendering time. And you can even lay out differently. If you're rendering in PDF, the report could look different to Excel. And I pointed out that you have a user ID built-in field that you can even do different layouts and different data for the different users. You can write native queries against your data sources using SQL or MDX or DAX. If you don't know how to write native queries, there are graphical query designers to assist you. There's a new capability for static data sets that allow you to have fixed data. Now, I think the important part about that is that you might do demos or proof of concepts without needing real data. Data integration is supported because a paginated report can have multiple data sources, and therefore you can integrate in the one report data coming from different locations. Now, if you're going to do data integration, you might consider using Power BI Desktop. And Power BI Desktop as a tool can model and integrate with Power Query multiple data sources. You can then publish that to your workspace, and then your paginated report can query the data set in Power BI. Now, parameterization, as I've already mentioned, is a very strong point for paginated reports. And my example tonight of a cascading parameter with available values and default values, very powerful. If you have your image data stored as blobs or large binary objects sitting in your databases, then paginated reports can render from those images. There's the ability to define custom code. Look at this. If I open up the report properties, here in the code window, you can write VB.NET to do interesting things like regular expression pattern matching, or you could even communicate with an Azure function as part of your report design. Flexible grid layouts with the table and matrix. If you have SQL Server spatial data with geometry or geography, then the paginated reports map can render them. So custom polygons and lines can be rendered in a paginated report. Modern gauges that are fairly good looking, so radial and linear gauges with scales and ranges. If your data has HTML markup, then the paginated report can render that with the style tags. You can produce what we call a mail merge report, like dear customer name. And you saw me use the placeholders to inject expressions. So you could build letters that are published from a paginated report. Interactivity features, I haven't demonstrated them, but you've got visibility, drill down, drill through, links, and column sorting are interactive features supported for HTML rendering. And lastly, I introduce you to the concept of subscriptions, where according to a schedule, the Power BI service can render and attach a report to an email and send them to one or more people. All right, a quick word about migration of reports. That if you already use SQL Server reporting services, and I'm referring to RDL reports, I'm not referring to the mobile reports or the KPIs. The RDL reports can be migrated and automatically published to Power BI for you. Now, the first thing to understand is that not all reporting services features are supported in Power BI paginated reports. Most notably, shared data sources and shared data sets are not supported. But also, there's no support currently for report drill through or report paths. Okay, so if there are unsupported features, the migration tool for shared data sources and shared data sets will convert them to become report-specific data sources and report-specific data sets. For other unsupported features, they're just not possible to migrate. You'll have to redesign the report. Now, for reports that pass the checks or that convert, they can be published automatically to a workspace of your choice. All right, this is an unofficial tool. It's available on GitHub, and you're welcome to download and use it and to test it. The other approach is you can open your RDL documents in Paginated Report Builder, and you can verify that they're okay to publish, or you can modify them until they're ready for publishing. Okay, so there is a migration path for reporting services. So I pretty much arrived at the end of the presentation. I do have some resources to share with you. Now would be a good time to know if there are any questions from anybody.
So everyone, if you have any question, you can unmute yourself and state your question, or you can message it on the chat.
Yep, or maybe there are no questions, that it was just such a thorough presentation. I don't know. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, we're right about there. It's 7:50, so.
Then I just need a couple more minutes. And so if there are no questions, maybe there'll be questions later. So in the resources, and by the way, I can let you download this PDF and it has the links in it. The FAQ, there is well-documented FAQ at Microsoft Documentation. So many frequently asked questions. Let me click on this now. We'll take a quick look. For example, what premium capacity do I need? You know, so all of these frequently asked questions are well documented with their answers here at Microsoft. So if you have questions later on, there you go. There's also some great guidance on paginated reports. So I want to point this out that I've written, and these are written by me, you know, when to use paginated reports, guidance on data retrieval and image use and cascading parameters, avoiding blank pages, and migration to SQL Server or from SQL Server reporting services. So there's good documentation already available here on these topics. Okay, so there we go. Now, the best resource I'm going to share with you is that I was very fortunate in February to be in Redmond, and the PM for Paginated Reports, Christopher Finlan, and I went to Microsoft Studios together with the unofficial mascot of Paginated Report Bear. And the three of us recorded 24 videos on learning or teaching you how to use paginated reports. These videos are free and you're welcome to watch them. They're all up there on YouTube. Now, there's one other thing that you need to be aware of is that there is a self-study kit. And if you go to the web page that I have here, then what it does is it tells you how to go ahead and download the self-study kit. And it's basically 8 labs teaching you about paginated reports, right? So it's right here. You can download a self-study kit. You use the link that we provide you. You extract it. and then you install Power BI Report Builder, and then you can work through the labs. Now, the great news is that you do not need a premium license to do this because the labs are working on your desktop with Power BI Report Builder that is free. If you do want to publish them to Power BI, you would need a dedicated capacity, but you do not need to do that to finish these labs. So if you're keen to learn more about paginated reports, I totally recommend this free series of videos and self-study kit to do the labs yourself. And that pretty much brings my presentation to an end. I've just got a quick marketing slide that if you're ever interested in training, including virtual training, that I do a lot of Power BI teaching and I can teach over the internet. So if there's any interest, I typically teach at customer level. And what I mean is that I teach not individuals, but I teach classrooms. If you're at a company that wants to learn Power BI and do some classroom training, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, my final slide is very simple. If you'd like to download the presentation because it includes those links, then you can use the QR code here or the tiny URL that I've got on the screen. And Pio, I'll send this link to you and you're welcome to email it to your user group members.
Yeah, that's awesome. We do have one question on the chat. It's from Lena Chan. Is it possible to publish the Power BI paginated reports in-house rather than Azure?
So we're publishing it to Power BI, okay? So no, Power BI paginated reports are for cloud delivery. You can look at a different product. You can use SQL Server and you can keep it on premises. Or there is Power BI Report Server, which is on-premises reporting. All right, but Power BI Report Server can be licensed only through Premium or through software assurance with SQL Server Enterprise. Okay, so the answer is you can have paginated reports on premises, but it's a different discussion from tonight. Tonight was using paginated reports in Power BI, which means they must be published to the cloud.
All right, thank you. I think that answers her question. I do have a sort of a roundabout question. You showed earlier that you can migrate the SSRS reports to Power BI, right? Using the RDLs. Can you do the other way around? For example, if I created any RDL reports on Power BI, can I move it to SSRS?
Why? Okay, you probably could, providing that the paginated report only used features that SQL Server Reporting Services understands.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are some things that are new in paginated reports. I've never been asked that question before, and it's an unusual thing to go backwards. But let's just say the answer is probably, and the worst case is you could open up the RDL document and you might be able to make manual edits to the RDL to make it work.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's an unusual question that someone would go backwards to SQL Server.
Yeah. Yeah. So, does anyone else have any questions? If not, then I would like to thank Peter for his time.
Thanks, Peter.
You're all welcome. Well, I hope you found it informative and educational, and hopefully one day I'll be back in Singapore and I can deliver to you in person.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for having me present to your user group this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. Yes. Well, then at that rate, I will then wish everybody good night.
All right. Good night, Peter. While we're waiting for the next presenter, if you could provide your feedback. I'm flashing the QR code, and I already messaged the link on the chat. We're gonna take we're going to take I think 5-minute break, and then at 8 p.m. we're gonna start with the next session for SQL code testing. Let me just full screen. Paul, are you already on the meeting? Are you this one?
Yeah, this game.
There you go. Just gonna promote you to presenter so you can start at 8 p.m.
Okay.
So yeah, so I think everyone back from wherever you. Well, I hope you guys are still there. We're about to start with our next session, which is automating SQL code testing by Paul Young. Paul Young is a MCM from Idaho. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct.
Yeah. So we're gonna start at 8.
All right. Let's see. How do I?
All right. So anytime you want to start sharing your screen, you can. I already made you a presenter. So welcome everyone. Like I mentioned earlier, this is our second session for tonight with Paul Young.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. So I want to present how to automate SQL code tests. So this usually, well, is the scenario is that you work with SQL code, and you at least have 5 different versions where you have your code to be compatible. I guess I can make it bigger. So every time you write code on, let's say, on SQL 2016, and then you have to test that your code is either backward compatible with previous versions or forward compatible with newer versions. And in this case, we're testing SQL 2012 all the way to SQL 2019. And if you manually have to do it, that means you have to create your stored procedure or run your query on each version, and you must have each version installed somewhere, and you have to test it one by one. So it's time consuming. So what you can do is automate it. So what you're going to see is how to automate it, and all the code is in GitHub, so you can download it if you want. And I guess I can show you what the code is. So it's in GitHub, and then this is the link, and you will see all the files I'm going to use for this solution. So I want to start with Azure DevOps, which, so here. So on Azure DevOps, you will have a project. So I already created, but I'll start from from the beginning. And in this project, it has the advantage of DevOps is that you have source control. So you have all your repos. So all the files that you saw on GitHub are all over here. So I already created my project. And so I won't go to all the steps how to create a project, but if you go to this file that said add demo resources, it gives you all the scripts, all the steps of how to create the project and all the resources that you need in Azure in command line. So you just run the commands and it will create everything and your DevOps project. So I already created. So after you run all the commands, you will have a project like this, and you will have all the files here in source control. So every time you check in your code, it will execute a pipeline. So one advantage of Azure DevOps is everything is managed for you. So it's a cloud solution. But you don't have to be, or your automated tasks are not necessarily on the cloud. You can also automate on-premise tasks with on-premise agents. But in this scenario, I'm using the cloud, so I'm using Azure to run the agent and install the VMs. So the pipeline is a sequence of tasks. And then I have one here. And then as you notice, there is one that failed. I'll show you why it failed, but you will see that I ran it 4 times. And then I'll show you, for example, this one. So and it will do a sequence of tasks, and then I'm showing you the end result. So the end result is testing your code and how you see the results. But then later we'll dive into each one of the components. But just to give you an overview, so this is your pipeline, and all these are your tasks. So one of the tasks is install your VMs. We'll talk about that later. And one of the output is, so I'm installing SQL VMs on Azure, and I have 2012, 2014, 2016, 17, and 19 installed with their IP address so I can log in. And then I need to deploy the code, so I have another script that goes and create stored procedures that I need to test. And the next one is to test the SQL code. So to test the SQL code, I'm using a tester. So in this case, I have my test that I executed, and if they succeed, they won't show any error. And then once my code is tested or passed the test, I publish the results, and there is a pipeline task to publish the results. So you can see a nice report, and I can show it to you how it looks like. So this is my results of the test, and you don't have any errors. You get a trophy, and you can see in this case, I can show pass, so I can see all the tests that pass. And when it fails, you will see where it failed. So I'll show you the one that failed, because it said the one of the tests didn't pass. So it will tell me which one failed, and you can see the error. You can scroll down and it'll tell you all the ones that failed, and then if I can click on the details, it'll tell you where it failed. And you can see the error said, string split is an invalid object. So you're familiar with SQL Server, so a string split is a function that became available, I think it's on 2016. So if I'm using a function that is only available in 2016 and above, then it will fail on previous versions. That's the reason that 2012 failed and 2014 failed. So in that way, I can automatically test every time I deploy code if it's going to be forward and backward compatible with the different versions that you support. So I'm going to show you the code behind all this. So this is my latest run, but I'm going to show you the previous run. So this run over here. So we publish the test results. I just show you, and then I uninstall my VM. So there will be another script to uninstall the VMs, clean up everything so you don't have to pay for it. So because as you know, on Azure, for the VMs, you have to pay for them. So this test takes about $2 of Azure credits if you have a free account. And then after you finish, it's just do the rest on the code. So I forgot to mention that it also check out the code that I have there. So it runs the git commands. So I will do that every time you want it. So you can schedule it to run, or it can run when you commit a change. So all these tasks on the pipeline, there are different ways to do it. So you can do the graphical way, where you can add tasks and then you tell what scripts run, or you can use what I call a YAML file. So that's what I used here, and it's called Azure Pipelines YAML. So in this case, the trigger is known. So I'm not triggering every time I commit. I just trigger when I run it. And then, so there are properties that you can set to your pipeline. In this case, I'm telling to not run more than 60 minutes. And if for some reason there's an error, so I at least give them 30 more minutes to clean up. So every time there's an error, it will remove all the resources from Azure. So we economize that way. And then the pool, so in this case, this is my agent. So you on Azure DevOps, you can run agents on Linux or on Windows. In this case, I'm running on Windows. And I have a variable called image offer, where I pass this variable between the tasks. So this is my first task, and I'm using the task called Azure PowerShell. So what it means is the agent will load all the modules to work with Azure already for you. But you can load it in your PC if you wanted to. But that will do it for you. And then that's where I'm going to pass the script. So all it's doing is calling PowerShell scripts. So the first script is to install a SQL VM. The second script is to install the code, and then to test the code, and then to publish the results that I show you, and then finally it will uninstall all the VMs. So far the pipeline, what it's doing is calling all the scripts I already written in PowerShell. And then all those scripts which are here, which are in GitHub, I use Visual Studio Code. So the same scripts that you saw on the pipeline, which is, for example, install SQL VM, is already here. So then I just was testing to see if it was working, so I'll delete it. So this is Visual Studio Code. It's easy to work with scripts, and one of them is PowerShell. So here I'll just give you a quick demo of how to run it if you run it on your PC. And so I already have some parameters set to run it. So I'm initialize my parameters. So what I'm doing right now is getting a credential. So I have I use a vault from Azure also, and this is a PowerShell command to get the password from the vault. So in this case, I want to get my password, which is the password which I use to create the VMs. So I can log into those. So I get a password from the vault, and also the steps to create a vault are in the add demo resources script. So now what I'm going to do is to get the images that are available to install on Azure. So in this case, I want SQL 2012 to 2019. So you can have a regex expression like this, where I can tell them I want SQL 2012 all the way to 19. So it will be 1 to 2 and 0 to 9, because those are the numbers for the versions. And then WS is because I want Windows, and I don't want to buy your own license. So I just filter those there. So I can run it over here, providing the regex functions. So I'll run it, all of it, and then I'll show you what it is. We'll run in a few seconds. All right, so to get the image, so if I run this, it's going to filter only the ones that we want. So I will show you, in this case, SQL 2012, 2014, 16, 17, and 19. And there are also, at least for the last versions, you can choose between Windows 2016 or Windows 2019. So on Azure, you have a way to install older versions, but you have to do it programmatically, because the portal always installs the latest CU or the latest service pack for the major version. So my next command is to get the SKU, which is New Enterprise or Standard Edition. But in this case, I'm filtering for Enterprise because that's what my on-premise setup is. So if I run this command, then I get me the SKUs, all the Enterprise ones. And then if I want to get the image, and then I'll filter some of the columns. So now I'm getting all the versions available on the cloud on Azure. So for example, 15, which is 2019, and you will see that the format of the version is a little bit different than what DBAs are used to it, or SQL people that you will expect the CU number or the service pack number, but you will see that is the date where they refresh the image. So, and Microsoft refresh the image every 2 or 3 months, or it depends. For example, for 2019, it came out on 2019 11/04, so November. Then they updated in December, then on January, and then on March. But that doesn't mean it is the latest. So March, I think it's CU3, SQL 2019 CU3, and right now it's CU4. So if they add it on sometime in May, they may choose to do CU4 or CU5 if it comes out. So, but anyway, so that's the way the versions are organized. And then in this case, I just want the latest version. So this one for 2019, and for 2016, I want also the one was on March. So all the images that were refreshed on March for 2016 and 2019. So that's what I do when I do a group. And then I run it, so you will see how it looks like. So I'm just using the group object commandlet in PowerShell to group it. So if you're familiar with T-SQL, when you do a group by, and I want the max, right? So in this case, for example, I'm grouping by the major version, which is 15, and give me the max will be this one. So that's what I'm doing. That's what group object is doing. So for 15, this is the latest version. And then I get the name of the offer, and then if it's enterprise or standard. So, and here all what I'm doing is converting this format into an array of hash tables, because that's what I'm going to pass to my template. So I'm going to use a template for creating SQL Server VMs. So I'm going to just run it, and then show you how the results look like. So it looks like this. It's just an array of attribute value pairs. So then I'm going to use a template to create the 5 VMs in parallel. So if you remember on my pipeline here, so I'm going to show you when it's executing the tasks. So here it's doing the install SQL VMs, and you see that it took 11 minutes to install the VMs on the cloud. And the reason I'm using a template is because you can install all the 5 VMs in parallel. So you install 1 VM or 5 VMs, it takes almost the same amount of time, which is 10, 11 minutes to create all of them. And if I go back to my Visual Studio Code, so the template looks like this. So you start with parameters that you want to pass, and there is a section which are the resources. So I guess I can minimize parameters. So then there's a section also for variables. If you want to pass variables, but what we're interested are the resources. So each resource is in JSON format. So you have your attribute and your value here. And in this case, to install a VM, I need to have a network card, a network interface. So I just pass the parameter of how the network interface is going to look like. And then I'll explain what a copy means. But then my next resource will be a public IP address, because I need access to it from my PC. So I need to create a public IP. And then I specify the storage accounts. And then this is a virtual machine I'm going to create. And then if you remember that I'm passing these parameters, which are the version, the name, the SKU, and the offer. So all these parameters that you see down below here are the ones that are passing over here. So that in that way, I telling which versions that I want. So the way you do it in parallel is in each resource you can say copy. So that's the reason that you see after each resource there is a copy command there. And then what I'm doing is, because this is an array, so that number of elements are the number of members of the array, right? So that's the reason I do copy. Oh, where's the other one? So copy and count are the length of the parameters. That means the number of elements here. So in this case, there are 5 VMs I want to do. So we copy the same resources on the template 5 times. And for each time, it's like an array. So for each time, I'm passing the name of each resource. So it's not as complicated as it looked like. It's not. You just need to get used to the syntax of each one of the resources for the template. And then I use a parameter template. So I can pass all the parameters using a parameter file. The type of disk, port numbers, the drive. So once I have all that, all I have to do is calling the template with this commandlet called new AC resource group deployment, and it will be deployed. And once it's deployed, so I need to get the IP address. So one of the disadvantages of the template is when you have the copy command, you cannot get the output. So the output, as of now, doesn't support the copy command. So I cannot output the IP address for those 5 VMs. So what I'm doing is also with PowerShell, I'm getting the IP address for each one of them. So in this case, I want the first one. So I'm gonna run all this so you can see how it looks like. So I'm gonna get the IP address for the first one. So to get it from PowerShell, you have to get the VM, get a network profile, the network interface, the IP configuration, and finally the IP address, right? So I won't go too much details because it's a lot of code to demo. I want to get overwhelmed. And then we already got the IP address, so I can connect to that server and execute my SQL command. So that's what this part of the code does. And then the next part of the code, what it does on Azure DevOps, to output variables, there is a command, special command called this one, set variable, and you just do right host, and it will output this variable, and it will pass it to the next task on the pipeline. So I was here, so I installed my VM. So my next task is this one, install SQL code, and I pass that parameter to the next task. And then the output of the previous parameter is what I showing you on Visual Studio Code, but this one is executed by the agent, so we give you similar output. Another thing is that I also get the SQL version. So you can compare that on, for example, the latest version. Here on March 10, the CU that they use to refresh the image is CU3. And then on March 10 for 2016, so CU19 is for 2017, the latest that they have there. So go back to my Visual Studio Code. So now we're going to look at the install SQL code. What it's doing is just have a function that loops through a directory structure to deploy all the objects. So I call it invoke script object. And the scripts, which are also on GitHub. So you start with creating a database. So I have a demo database. And then I have a split function that I need to use according to the version. And then I have some procedures, like a delete, insert. And then as you remember when I showed you the test result output, there was a string split error. So since I already tested and I know that it's not backward compatible, so I need to put on my code an if statement. If the version is greater than 2016, use a split function, and if not, you have to use a user function that uses the same thing as the split function. So, and then there is select, there is update, and it's the table. Just one table, 4 stored procedures, and 1 function. That's what we deploy with this script. Install SQL code. Yeah, I won't go into the details into that. I want to save some time, so I can spend more time on the next task, which is testing the code. So the next script that the pipeline calls is this one, which is test code, and this one is just a wrapper to call invoke pester. So the module for pester is called pester. So you just install the module, and then I call this script, and then my output is an XML output, which DevOps will take it and read it. So now this is what I'm going to explain is how to test code with pester. So pester is a testing framework for PowerShell. And since PowerShell can interact with different resources like databases, then that means you can also use pester to test database code. So I have a function called test procedure because I want to test the procedures, and I pass some parameters. Now, the way pester works is, if you're familiar with PowerShell, describe is not used normally in PowerShell, but if you are going to use pester, then there is a new statement called describe, which is the start of your test. So every test needs to start with describe. And in this case, I just pass in the version, and then I do the other element for testing code is the it. So the it statement is you put the name of the test and then what are you comparing. So, and most of the comparisons are this way. So the left side is your actual result, and the right side is what it should be. So that's the way you test code. For example, I'm testing here the number of rows that I got on my result and what it should be compared to what is expected. So that is what this test is about. It's just comparing my actual result with what I expect. And then, so where do I put those? So I have a hash table where I put every procedure or every query that I want to test. And for example, this store procedure is inserting these rows and with these variables on this database. And because it's an insert, I don't expect any rows back, so it's 0. And then you can test for the state that is before and what's the result that it should have. So I have all my tests here on in a hash table, on a PowerShell hash table, which I'll pass to this function. So for example, I'll initialize some of the variables instead of going through a loop. And let's see. Okay, so now I'll run it so to see how it looks like. So I'll run the describe format. So describing my test. Usually doesn't take that long unless I forget something. Found inaccessible. Let's see. So I think when I run this, I don't remember if I got the credentials. So I'm gonna run. I got a credential. Let's see. Let's check. So I did get a credential, network, connection to SQL Server. So do I get it right? IP address. So this is the IP address. Mm, 51, 141, 65. Yeah. All right. For some reason, it cannot connect. All right. Let's get the credential again, just in case. Credential. Oh, I know why. Because I didn't highlight the IP address. All right, so now I get the IP address. So it's failing to connect to SQL Server, and that's in the function that that I show you, which is the describe part. So I have to execute it. So result, which is this one. So I'm using evoke SQL command to execute it. So now if I run this, I should be able to connect. Or maybe not. Now what is well, I need to get a query. Maybe initialize a query. All right, let's try this way. All right, so now it works. So initialize some more variables. So the describe part is what it's describing. And then each one of the tests is here. So first I check for errors, and there is no errors. But the number of rows in the output, it should be 3, so I expected to be 3, but I got 2, so that's the reason it showed me that it fell. So, and then I test for the column names and the values, and then I'll deep dive of each one of these ones. So here, I'm just passing the parameters to run the inbox SQL command. So the IP address, the database, and my credential. And then this one was what I was trying to run earlier, but I didn't initialize the parameters, so it's all running now. But then that's the reason it didn't like it. But then, so when I check for errors, I say if errors, I compare the result with what it should be, and if it's not null, you give me errors, and then this is the expected rows. So the reason it fell on the test is because I put 3. So let's say if I put 2, because I only get 2, so I initialize this again. And then if I run my test again, so here, expected output value to be greater than 2, but got 2. Because I use greater than, not equal. So now I run it. Now all the tests should pass. Okay, so now it's all green. They all pass. But so that's the way you run tests with Pester, with SQL Server. I don't know if there's any questions so far.
No.
Yeah, I don't see any questions on the chat right now. If
Okay.
anyone has questions, they can just post on the chat and let us know.
Yeah, it's a lot of code to demo. So you're not familiar with PowerShell. It's a little bit difficult to grasp all the commands, but that's the way you automate a test with PowerShell. And again, everything is on GitHub, so you can download the code and test it yourself and play around. And the same way I'm doing it here. So you just run part of the code and see what errors did you get, and you can try to fix them. So let's see what I was going to do. Oh yeah, so after the testing the code, the next one is to publish the results. And let's see, I go back to my pipeline. So we already did the test code, and this is the result of running all the tests. All my inserts, my deletes, creating my table and everything on each version. So automatically it's testing on each version. So you can see on the describing, that's the reason I put part of the version. So I'm testing on 2019, I'm testing on 2017, and testing on 2016, and so on. So after that, I publish the test results on the task, which we already seen. And in this case, I didn't delete the VMs because I want to keep them to demo. So, but on this one, I am uninstalling all the VMs, so which is the next task over here. So to uninstall the VMs, there are different ways to do it. So one is to drop the resource group, and then everything that was inside the resource group, everything gets deleted. But in my case, I don't delete it. I'm not deleting the resource group. I keep the resource group. So when I create my objects, all of them has a tag name. So I'm just deleting the resources by tag. So that's the reason I start with, let's see, I need to move this thing over here. So I delete the virtual machines first, then the disk, then a network interface, and the IP address, and the storage accounts. So all that is executed through this one, which is the same as this script. And this is what is on my pipeline, just to recap. So that pipeline is on the YAML format, which is this one. So this is my last task on the pipeline. So another thing to mention is that you can add conditions in your pipeline. So on this particular one, it said enable false because I didn't want to drop my VMs. But when it's enable, it will run with this condition. It says succeed or fail. So whatever task was previous to that, even if it failed, it will drop everything. So we clean up everything, so you don't keep paying for it. So, and that's the reason it also has a parameter called cancel timeout in minutes, because when it fails, it at least takes 10 minutes to drop everything. So I give it 20 more minutes just in case. So we'll drop everything. And let's look at one of the pipelines that is dropping it to see how long it takes. This one over here. So this one takes 16 minutes. So it took about 9 minutes to install and took 16 minutes to uninstall everything. And then, so this is how the pipeline is. And then I was going to show you that on GitHub also has a, so all the scripts that I show you are in GitHub. And for example, to uninstall the VMs, but then there's also, once you finish, you can also run this one that is how to drop everything. So here I'm using the Azure client. So I'm deleting my service principal, I'm deleting my project and everything. So you get the script to add the demo resources and the script to remove the demo resources. You need to do your cleanup. And then all the other scripts are here. Let's see what else. And then, so on DevOps, there is other things that you can do. So I only show you, the repo, where is similar to GitHub, a Git repository. But this one is an Azure Git. But also you can do, the pipelines I already show you. But also you can have test plans, artifacts. And then if you are in you also use Visual Studio teams. You can also coordinate the work, the DevOps task or tickets, and you can have boards and backlogs and all these things that you can use. But on this demo, I only use the repo and the pipeline. But yeah, so that's all I have, just to show you, that everything that you can automate with PowerShell is not yeah, I didn't want to show all the details to to not overwhelm you with all the code, but just to give you an overview of how DevOps works with PowerShell and Azure, and hope you like it and you want to learn more.
Yeah, so I think we can open the floor for any questions. If you have any questions, this will be the best time to throw it. If you are curious, if you want to reuse this and run your own test on your own code, you just need to modify the procache table and the test SQL code and test SQL code tester, right? Then you can plug in whatever you have on your own, whatever the procedures you want to test. Let's see. Anyone else has any question? Really quiet bunch.
Probably fall asleep with too much PowerShell code.
Yeah, it's a nice use of Pester. I've always wanted to see how Pester works, so that's a great great way to use Pester. Anyone else has any questions? Going once?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So I want to thank Paul for a very technical session.
Yep.
It's a great. Oh yeah. So everyone is just saying thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you are interested in DevOps, it's a very good demo. So yeah. So guys, if you can kindly fill up the evaluation. I think I can put the link on the chat. And then we don't have any schedule yet for the next one, but we'll definitely keep everyone informed.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks all
Okay.
for a great demo. So exit this. And yeah, so everyone, if you can just drop an evaluation about the session tonight, as well as the virtual meetup as a whole, that would be a great input for us. And that's all. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Paul, for a great session. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight, and see you next meetup.
Thanks, bye.